Good evening, everybody, and thank you all for coming along to tonight's Research Tuesdays event. Clearly, it's very a popular one, machine learning and health, very relevant in today's day and age. Just to introduce myself, my name is Ali Anderson, and I'm the Operations Manager for the Australian Institute for Machine Learning here at the University of Adelaide. I'd like to start tonight's proceedings by acknowledging the Kaurna people, the original custodians of the Adelaide Plains and the land on which the University of Adelaide's campuses at North Terrace, Waite and Roseworthy are built. We acknowledge the Kaurna people as traditional custodians of these lands and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Tonight we turn our attention to machine learning and health, with 4 key points being covered tonight. What is machine learning? How does it apply to the health and medical sector? What are the possibilities and opportunities for machine learning in health in South Australia and more globally? And how is the University of Adelaide leading the way? We have 3 experienced and passionate researchers tonight who will lead the discussions, beginning with Professor Anton van den Hengel, who is indeed my line manager and a wonderful man. Give me a pay rise. So Anton is the director of the University of Adelaide's Australian Institute for Machine Learning. After that, we'll have Emma, are you next, or is it Johan? Johan, we'll have the esteemed Dr. Johan Fergens. He is the Deputy Director of Medical Machine Learning at the Institute, and he is also a cardiologist, so very well placed to give us a speech on that. And finally, we have Professor Emma Baker, who is leading the University of Adelaide's Healthy Cities Research Group. So they will all introduce themselves a little more thoroughly as they give their presentations. So it will be a short presentation from each of those people, followed by a panel discussion led by myself. Now, due to the audience size and the constraints of time we have tonight, we took audience questions as part of our initial registration process. So what we are doing is we have collated these into themes, and I will be leading the majority of the themes that came out from that, so we won't actually be taking audience questions afterwards, but we will endeavour to answer everything that we were asked. So without further ado, I would now like to invite Professor van den Hengel to the stage to begin the night.
Thank you very much. All right. So, yeah, I'm Anton van den Hengel. I'm the director of the Australian Institute for Machine Learning and a professor of computer science here at the University of Adelaide. I don't know, I've been doing it for quite a long time. I had an email the other day that told me that I'm welcome to a ceremony that's for people who've been at the university for 25 years, which is a little bit frightening, but you know, I guess you get good at it eventually, right? So I run this group of close enough to 130 people. We're a research institute of the University of Adelaide, so we've recently moved into a new building over on Lot 14 on the corner of Frome Road and North Terrace. We're the one on the old RAH corner there, and we're doing quite well, right? We're a very big group. We're we're the biggest machine learning research group in Australia. We do very well on a bunch of measures, so we're 3rd in the world in publications in key conferences in computer vision. Computer vision is the bit of machine learning that's about trying to make computers see, and it's the part of the field that's really made the big leaps and bounds over the last decade, and is really largely responsible for all of the renewed enthusiasm about machine learning and AI. We won the VQA challenge at CVPR in 2017. That is a part of computer vision that's about trying to have a conversation with your computer such that you can talk about things that it can see. We're doing quite well in a bunch of these things. Maybe the most relevant ones here are Refuge 18. So we won a challenge that's about, in one of these big medical conferences. There's whole separate conferences for medical machine learning. And that one was particularly hard fought and another pathology challenge. There are a bunch of things that happen inside the Australian Institute for Machine Learning, not least deep learning theory, robotic vision, visual question answering, and medical machine learning. We are, you can't get to, it says 120 people there, but that's it's a bit out of date. I think we're closer to 130 now. You can't get to 130 people without having people doing almost everything. We're doing art. I was just on the phone talking about our latest art project. We're doing mining. I was talking to a guy about asteroids the other day. Pretty much anything you can think of, we're applying machine learning to it. It's a very good time to be in machine learning because everybody's interested. Now, so what does machine learning mean? We get called an AI research group a lot, and we misuse the term a little too. A lot of the enthusiasm at the moment is about artificial intelligence. The difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning is that artificial intelligence is it's a field that's been around for a very long time, and it's about trying to replicate behavior that you would really expect to need a human to be able to do. So trying to replicate human intelligence. There's no good definition of it, and that's as bad a one as any, but the definition keeps changing. We used to think that chess was a really tough AI problem. Turns out that chess is a very easy problem, and your calculator now plays chess better than you do. But we've moved on, right? So every time we solve one of these problems in AI, it turns out that it was actually an easy problem. And that, it turns out that actually having a sensible conversation is a much harder AI problem than playing chess, despite the fact that there are many more people who can do it. So machine learning, on the other hand, is a way of programming computers that's about them learning how to do it for themselves. So there are all these things that we would like to be able to tell computers how to do, and that we don't actually have an algorithm for, right? So an algorithm is a recipe that you give to a computer. So it's a set of instructions on how you might do something. And there's a whole lot of things that we want computers to be able to do that we don't have a recipe for, right? So I'm partly engaged in trying to teach computers how to see. Most of us can see. None of us know how we do it, right? If you look up at that thing and you look at the title up there, there's 6 characters at the top of that slide there. As soon as you see those things, they get turned into information in your brain. You can't turn it off. Right? You weren't born with that ability. A whole lot of people tried very hard in your early school career to give you that ability, and now that you've got it, you can't turn it off. You also don't know how you do it. So if we want to teach a computer how to do it, that makes it quite hard. Right? Nobody's got a good algorithm for that problem. And for a whole lot of different problems. Before I change slides, we should talk about deep learning. Deep learning is a flavor of machine learning that's motivated by the connections in our brains. It really doesn't have all that much to do with biological brains, but it, at a very broad level, you could see it as being motivated by that. But it's only one form of deep learning, of machine learning. There's all sorts of other kinds. So the lack of a definition of AI is a real challenge. Oh, we jumped one too far. Is a real challenge for the field. So this is a graph of the length of time until it's predicted that we'll have AI, irrespective of when you ask. Right? So you take a bunch of papers from the 60s until 15, and they all make predictions about how far away machine learning is. If you histogram those predictions, so you count them for each year bracket, then you get that graph. And what that tells you is that AI is perpetually 20 years away. And that's probably the best definition of AI. So what we think we'll be able to do in 20 years is kind of, is a better definition than the one I just gave you, right? So if you want to distinguish images of cats from images of dogs, each one of those images comes up, you instantly know whether it's a cat or a dog. You can't turn it off, right? If I hold your eyes open and make you look at the images, there's nothing you can do to stop that information clicking into your brain. And we have no idea how you're doing it, and we can't write a recipe for it. So the best way to teach this, you've never seen that image before. I can guarantee that you've never seen those pixels before, right? And the cat's not there. Yeah, that's just a set of colored blobs on a screen. There's no catness about that thing whatsoever, right? The cat is purely in your head. And nonetheless, I can guarantee that you've all got cat in your head, right? So, if you want to come up with a cat detector, or you want to distinguish images of cats from images of dogs, it's really hard. They're both brown, furry, four-legged things with tails, right? The way that you do it, instead of trying to come up with a recipe, is to show a machine learning system literally 10,000 images of cats and 10,000 images of dogs with labels on each, and it will learn to make the distinction. Yeah? It will figure out how to tell you whether a new image that it's never seen before is a cat or a dog. It's pretty amazing, really, right? More amazing than that, it does it better than humans. If you run humans, so there's a data set of these images that's got tens of thousands of them, and if a human does it, a human gets about 96% of them right, and the computer gets 98% of them right. So as much as you think you're an expert at distinguishing images of cats from dogs, it turns out the machine's better at it than you are. Despite the fact that it can't tell us how it's doing it, right? You can't tell us how you're doing it. It can't tell us how it's doing it. One of the differences between AI and machine learning is that machine learning is here right now. There's this narrative going around that the Terminator is coming to take all of our jobs, which is ludicrous. Not least because machine learning's here right now, right? You have used machine learning 4 times today at least. So if you've been on Facebook, the way that Facebook figure out what you're interested in reading is machine learning. So they've showed you a whole lot of articles. You've demonstrated to them which ones you're interested in, and they show you thus forth ones that you're interested in by predicting that using machine learning. More importantly, they predict which ads you're going to click on by analyzing which ads you've clicked on before, but also by analyzing what ads other people have clicked on before. And that's how they make a living. So, machine learning is Google, right? It is Facebook. It is Uber. You are using machine learning all day, every day, and the Terminator still hasn't come to work in the local fish and chip shop, right? Where we really, the dangers that people imagine from machine learning are almost completely ill-founded. This is the retinal image segmentation work that we did. It's not our image, but the idea is the same. You take an image of the back of somebody's eye. The competition we won was called Refuge, and it was part of MICI, which is the health medical imaging conference. We won against a whole bunch of people from around the world. It's important because analyzing the image of your retina, so you really can take an image of the retina of your eye by attaching a cheap lens to your phone and pointing it in somebody's eye and taking a picture. And it's non-contact, it's cheap, and you don't need any particular skill. And you can get a huge amount of information out of that image. So out of the pattern of blood vessels on the back of someone's eye, you can tell if they've got diabetes or they're going to get diabetes. You can tell if they've got heart disease. You can tell if they're going to have a stroke. You can see all sorts of genetic abnormalities straight out of this instant test that you can read out of the back of somebody's eye. And obviously there's a whole lot of people interested in how you might implement that for the third world. In a whole lot of places where they haven't got the technology to do the tests the slow old-fashioned way. Another another problem we worked on. So this is a product called APAS. It's some IP that we developed for a local company a few years ago now. And it's an automated agar plate reader. If you go to hospital with an unknown malaise, they will take a sample from you, so usually a blood sample. They'll wipe it over a bunch of agar plates and hope that something grows, and look at those plates later to characterize the growth in order to figure out what's wrong with you. This product that we built for them automates a lot of that process, and particularly means that the pathologist doesn't have to look at the empty plates. So pathologists are skilled people who waste a lot of their lives throwing away empty plates. This not only means that the skilled pathologist doesn't need to waste their time looking at plates that don't have any information, it also means that you can have the machine in Woomera or Azerbaijan and create the samples there, incubate them, take the photos, and that a pathologist in Adelaide can read them. So somebody who's in Woomera can have the best pathologist reading their plates relatively instantly. And it's, they're selling them in Europe now. It's a fantastic product. All right, that's it from me. Thank you. The people who are standing up, there are seats down the front here. I don't bite, but Johan does.
Thank you, Anton. Can everybody hear me? Maybe a little bit higher. Is that better? Okay. Thank you, Anton. Anton's name is Dutch and he imports Dutchmen. He and others have tempted me to come from the Netherlands to Adelaide because Adelaide has ambition to be good in health and is good in AI. And that was also the start of how we started working together. Long story short, thank you. The other part is that I'm also a doctor with a passion for research. And to combine that was actually really was possible in the Netherlands, but it was better here. And Adelaide has everything. If you have a family like we do, it's a good place to work and live and still be ambitious and get exciting things done. So I think it's many people should follow that example. And I'll show you a little bit what my journey has given so far. So a little bit practical. So I'm a cardiologist with specialty in imaging of the heart. So I image them, so I don't touch the heart, so I don't go with catheters, but I tell the specialists what to do based on the images, whether to operate or not. I also do this at the little imaging pod at SAMRI. And the other part of my job is actually to do research and find, throughout my career, it started with imaging, with biomarkers from the blood and imaging biomarkers. But I soon discovered 5 years ago that actually AI can give you biomarkers without injecting stuff into people. So I'm literally across the precinct and I cycle. So there's no cycling path, so please don't touch me when you're driving there, but you might see me on my little bike or my cargo bike even. Just to continue what Anton said, my assignment was a little bit to give as many examples. So I go sometimes a little bit quick, but I just want to show you that we're doing a lot in Adelaide and actually that this is going to impact healthcare quite a lot. So we're going to live in an augmented age. Everybody has a phone in their pocket. As Anton said, we have been augmented by AI or something smart already without really knowing it. So it's real good AI is actually that you don't notice that it's helping you. And hopefully that we will get this applied into healthcare as well. So, and the cool thing about machine learning is that, doctors and people who have been in a field for a long time, they're biased. And machine learning is not. So it does not, it is data driven, it considers all variables, and it does not depend on prior assumptions. And it has, what can it do for medicine? I think there's a few examples where people have attempted to see whether it can do what doctors can do. And as you can see, it mostly imaging problems. So imaging the head, pathology, so slides, pictures of slides in breast cancer, dermatology, skin cancer classification, eye disease, and also some things in, but this list is way longer, but this is, the first papers that actually showed that that a computer can do very specialized tasks as good or even better as a doctor. And what is really nice, there's many examples, but I think what is really interesting about machine learning that it can detect patterns. Our eyes are good at detecting a chair, but not very sophisticated patterns. So if a pathologist looks at a slide and it sees cancer, it can do that as well as a computer. But what the computer can actually do is actually see that the cells around the tumor, because these tumors secrete all these factors, actually are a different shape. So even trained pathologists wouldn't see that while computers do. So diffuse vague patterns can be really predictive or diagnostic of a certain disease. And I think this pathology example is a really good one. I'll go through a few specialties. I'm going to show you this. It's a very simple thing. Cardiologists actually draw these circles to measure your heart function if you have an MRI of the heart or an echo of the heart. Now there's a button. This company is one of the first. Actually, you don't see it here, but if I click it, it will automatically draw the circles for me. And that's trained on 5 to 10,000 images, and it will do it for me. And I only have to do a few adjustments, but it will save me 5 to 10 minutes per scan. So it's a beautiful example how it's already entered clinic. It will help people identify what kind of device people have. You don't need a little card in your pocket anymore if you have a device. And it can also just, if you have a scan, it can spit up all the measurements. This is my heart. This is the flow. This is a 3D volume of my flow in my heart. So this is the aorta, and here the vessels to the brain. And you can basically see all the blood go every second. Every second you can see flow going there, and you can measure that at every level. So that's really interesting for a lot of different diseases, just to see how well your heart is pumping, and or how bad it is, and how other connections contribute to problems in the heart. So this is a lot of complex data, but it spits it out automatically with this AI platform. So this is also something we already use in the clinic. What is interesting is that AI can do things as good, but sometimes it's really better at things that we probably could never do. So in this study, they actually looked at people who had a sinus rhythm, which is a normal, natural biological your biological rhythm, and people who had atrial fibrillation. So there might be some people in the room who have it. It's not a real bad arrhythmia if well treated, but you cannot detect it without electrical signal. In this paper, they actually looked at the faces of people, and from this signal, they could detect whether people have an arrhythmia or not. So it's really symbolic of how you can actually have non-traditional but very cheap measures to diagnose disease. Another good example of what we do here in town is actually look at polyps. Everybody gets screened colonoscopies nowadays, and it's all done manually, and the polyps are detected manually, and there's no real help. That's going to change in the near future. So we actually have programs that will detect these polyps. So this is an intestine, and sorry for the images if you didn't have dinner yet, but it shows very subtle. Sometimes you cannot even see it. The big ones you can see, but the small ones is hard to see. But the interesting part is you can actually biopsy them and look at pathology and say whether it's cancer or early stage of of transition. And you can train a system just based on this photo connected to the pathology and actually say, hey, the score is 4.6 in it being abnormal. So you have a video of all these guys where you have a circle around and you can say whether it's normal or abnormal. And actually this week, the first randomized clinical trial, which is a real proper clinical trial, appeared where they actually tried and developed this and it actually helped detect lesions better. So again, AI showing some helping the doctor. This I want to show again because this is really interesting also for our SAMRI Aboriginal Health Research theme at SAMRI. We're going to collaborate with them and with Flinders Ophthalmology also to look at, we're submitting a grant this week to look at eye images for rural screening and to detect disease earlier before people get blind. So it's really useful application to do that automatically somewhere in the outback. Orthopedics, we have many active research groups in town and we try to connect with them. We have one researcher who tries to generate automatic reports and he's really good at detecting fractures automatically by the computer. And he's 99.6, his algorithm is 99.6% accurate. But it also can generate reports. And there's many other problems in orthopedics that can be tackled and are being tackled. Another thing, radiology is being impacted. So imaging techniques, anything that involves imaging can be automated or at least sped up. And acquisition of a scan goes faster. Reconstruction, we just installed an MRI scanner, actually making your MRI probably 5 minutes less just because of an AI algorithm. Post-processing and reporting can also be automated. And we are attempting also to interact with all this data and actually get useful information from all these huge data sets that's associated with disease or, for example, sometimes you have a weird case on your scan and you have maybe one case you refer to, you say, once I saw this patient that had this same pattern, and then you base your decision, and it went well with this patient, so you base your decision, it's probably going to be all right with this patient. So that's very, a lot of doctors work like this. If you have a unique case, you have one or two cases that you compare to. This system could probably do much better and can just scroll through as a health databases and find similar images and tell the prognosis of these patients. So we're really trying to make this accessible for doctors, for researchers, and maybe hopefully in the end then patients actually to interrogate what they're, how well they're doing or how bad they're doing. Another spin-off from the university, I saw Jonathan is actually in the public, is a really good example is Live Whisperer, where AI actually enhances assessment of these eggs that basically get fertilized. And if you assess them well, you can actually enhance your results. And there's actually already babies that have been chosen in Adelaide, that have been chosen, in Australia and Adelaide probably as well, that have been chosen by an artificial intelligence algorithm. It's better than the best guy who ever did this. So we invented, the skill of assessing these cells. So there's AI babies. So surgery is it gets more complex, as you can imagine. Surgery is something that already has robots. Like here, it's a very expensive robot. Urologists use it a lot. There's not much evidence yet to say they're cheaper or faster, but the holes are much smaller, and people appreciate that, and the results are similar. But I think this is very similar. You can see that this pint is, it's probably prepared really well. Maybe, the crown is a little bit too much, but it's really slow. And it does the job, but it really does only this, and if something goes wrong, it cannot adjust. So this is the state of the art in beer preparation. You can imagine that it's still really hard to intervene in surgery, but there's surgeons who believe this will come in the next 5 to 10 years already. Cheers. So I just want to highlight some of the achievements because the medical arm of the Machine Learning Institute has been growing over the last 2 years because it wasn't the biggest part of the Machine Learning Institute, but we have an amazing opportunity to use similar technology and apply it to medical problems. So besides the automated plate reader and these challenges, we also, we were nominated for the Minister's Research and Innovation Award for these colonoscopy video detection. But it also, the whole track record and our mission actually gets big companies interested to help develop research here and then spread it, because we can also use these companies to spread our algorithms. So if Siemens likes something, they can install it on every scanner. So to have an article with something that is cool is less cool than having no article but Siemens using it all over the world, right? So it's really important for the research, and not only that, they also have some funding available. So, but there's still a whole avenue of things that we can do. These are technologies that are developed at AMOL. This is for sport, and people are tracked. You can imagine this could help in rehabilitation. We don't have any research in this, but you can imagine if you can quantify this, this could help. This I like less as a doctor. Basically, you can quantify everything you do, and you can actually quantify how fast you are and what you do. So as a doctor, I wouldn't like it, but I'm afraid this is going to happen at some point, at least for people who do real manual stuff. This is a babysitting app that was developed, but you can also monitor patients like this. So we can use similar techniques and see if there's anything abnormal. You can actually call the doctor or the nurse to intervene, and in aged care home this might have an application. Abnormality detection, people, wanderers in the hospital or people who are aggressive. It's you have cameras can actually detect. Here on the right you see that guy that doesn't go a little bit against the stream. You can actually detect abnormalities quite automatically. So this is, sorry for the quick examples, but it will gives you an idea of the potential impact it can have on almost every aspect, not only in medicine but also beyond. There's a healthcare costing crisis, and if it's not started by some definition, it will be there. So I think we need to automate and need to find ways to save money, and we're also talking to SA Health to help them improve and save costs. Fixed ramping, hopefully they will ask us once maybe, but and that's maybe a little bit sensitive, but so is AI already perfect? For narrow tasks, yes, but general AI is still far away. But the fact that we have these new kinds of computing already being possible, or at least feasible in some single quantum computing recently by Google, it probably demonstrates this will happen. So our society will be facing this, power that can analyze data at just exponential speeds compared to what we do now. So I learned a new term. It's called GGO, and GGO is called garbage in, garbage out. And GGO is a problem in machine learning. If you label your data wrongly, and these images kind of reflect this, if you label it incorrectly, you will teach the computer everything you incorrectly inputted. So that's a problem and a challenge that we are facing in this field. Also, if there's slight modifications, adding some small pixels, the 0 won't be detected as a 0 anymore, the 3 not as a 3, and these signs won't be recognized anymore. An interesting example is really looking at X-rays, giving a computer the assignment, can you predict mortality? It can do unexpected things, and on the left side you see a heat map of what the computer was looking at. So we can actually see what it was the black box was looking at, and it was actually looking at the neck. And in this case, it was really good at predicting death, but it was good because it detected tubes for ICU patients. So it was really good at detecting the tubes, which was pretty logical that people have a higher chance of passing away in the hospital. So this was not expected, but it was something that really is typical of a data set that you have unexpected findings. So doctors of the future. There's some guys who like to be in the news, especially the guy on the left. And this is always, there's no function a computer cannot do in radiology. This has led to some fears that, doctors are going to be replaced and things like that. But actually, the numbers in the United States, applications for radiology have increased just because of machine learning. So there was a 30% increase in 2015. while this was all happening. So actually there's a renewed interest. So jobs will probably change and the easy stuff will be done, but the radiologists who are old-fashioned and not use AI, they will be replaced by people who use AI. So, and in the end, will we have pilotless airplanes? Will we have clinics without doctors? No, there has to be somebody responsible, and that will take a long while before we trust all that. So what we know for sure is AI will augment doctors. It should enable doctors to have more patient contact. That's a little bit hard, but it should make us more efficient, and then we hope our CEO will actually give us that time. I have to put it there because I really hope to talk more to patients. Really quickly, what's in it for South Australia? Healthcare and AI investment worldwide is really increasing and going through the roof. We're number 3 in the world in computer vision image analysis. So if you have all these factors in the city, you can actually make sense of the data and actually improve diagnosis, prognosis, and a lot of other things, and save costs. So AI has potential to disrupt medicine in almost every aspect. It is untransparent, not smart yet, and vulnerable to untrained factors. General AI is still far away. Every year it's 20 years away, it's probably more. And doctors will be augmented with tools to facilitate in daily work, increase efficiency, reduce error, and spend more time with patients. South Australia is really well positioned to lead in AI, and we're pushing really hard in the city to convince everybody. And I think it's working. So I hope I can give you an update in a year or two, and then hopefully we have progressed and being a leading in medical AI in Adelaide.
Thank you. Okay, just a quick changeover. How's the volume at the back? Is it okay? Fantastic. So, my name's Emma Baker, and my position here at the university is as Professor of Housing Research, but I also run the Healthy Cities Group, which is a research group which is particularly interested in housing and health, and housing and cities, and health, and how they all go together. So I kind of come in as a slightly different kind of flavour to this talk. I've always been a quantitative researcher. I've worked a lot with epidemiologists and econometricians. So a lot of my work has been about thinking about how we think about problems. And so over the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot more work with the people from the Institute of Machine Learning, trying to think about how we can solve problems that we've never really been able to solve in the type of work that we do. Okay. Sorry. Now, the first thing is, I suppose the title that they gave my talk in this is Machine Learning and Data. Let's rename that and call it Thinking About How We Think About Machine Learning. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. So, is machine learning actually, as Anton and Johan could tell us, is it the answer to everything? Or is it just another tool in the toolbox that we might gather to kind of try and answer questions in a better way? And how might we, or should we, change the ways that we do things to bring in machine learning to the type of things that we do? Okay. So I want to start by looking back a bit at the way that we look at problems in science. So we're before machine learning here. So the traditional methods of science and medicine have really served us well over the last few generations. They've given us ways to understand the causes and the effects of ill health and treat and make interventions on things like diseases and illnesses. And really, I suppose, the advances that we've had over, 20 generations, each generation has given us longer lives and healthier lives. So the point I want to make is that everyone in this audience has really received a really solid grounding in those kind of ways of thinking. We think about the world in a certain kind of way, okay? So our brains have been trained to break down problems. You probably see where I'm going with this. break down problems, establish one part of the evidence base, move to the next one, establish what's happening in that part of the evidence base, gather another one, and try and put it all back together. So that's kind of our nature. You know, we've learned it at school and university, and lots of us have kind of applied it in our working lives as well. But the idea that I want to briefly kind of place in your mind is that these methods aren't completely perfect. They're sometimes, though, so ubiquitous that we forget to question them and their limitations. And so finally I get to why I've got this slide up. And that's the point, especially when people are concerned. So each person, each one of us and each person in this slide is completely different. You know, they're kind of a result of all of their exposures and their history and their genetics and all of the interventions that they've had access to and all of the other things that have existed in their lives, their opportunities, their choices. So when we're sort of thinking about problems of people, it's really actually very hard to pin down cause and effect and capture all of this complexity. So I thought I might show you an example from my work. So we're really interested in capturing the way that housing and health interact. So how does people's housing affect their health? And we've done this over many, many years, and what we've done is kind of broken down that problem. We've looked to try and produce good quality evidence that we can translate into policy and real people's lives. So we do this by kind of following people over time to get at cause, and we use really big data sets, and we're rigorous and careful in our statistics. But actually, you know, after doing this for a few years, you realise that it's actually impossible to capture the complexity of all of the things that are going on, okay, in models. You can't measure housing, and you actually can't measure health either. It's mainly to do with artificially pulling out bits of housing and bits of health. So the kind of the characteristics of people, and you look at them in isolation and then try and build them back up together. So that's a really long way of making a simple point. The way that we get around problems like that is by undertaking a really clever series of statistical tricks. Okay? So those statistical tricks do things like reduce the complexity of the problems that we're analysing, they control for all the influences, they let us understand how one thing mediates another thing, they average results, and they estimate outcomes across completely different populations. So I think we don't think about it very much, but really the evidence base that we're looking at for health and medical is actually based on a series of compromises, averages, and really closing our eyes a little bit to some of the detail. So my point in starting with this long story is that what we have at the moment in terms of the tools that are available to us is a good series of solid, tried and tested methods. And we never question them, but they're not perfect. So the question is, after listening to Anton and Johan, is machine learning the answer? I think I agree with them. Machine learning is far from the answer. It's not a replacement, but instead, let's think about it as a really powerful way of enriching the way that we understand problems, the way that we do things in science. So it's also not just another tool in the toolbox. The point I'm going to get to is that it's not the same way of doing things just with another tool. It's a completely different way of doing things. Okay. Oh. Okay. So in the last slide, I had a picture of a sonic screwdriver. And I think about half of the room will be Doctor Who people and the other half of the room won't be Doctor Who people. But the point of the sonic screwdriver is it's a tool but it's not just another tool in the toolbox. For people who don't follow Doctor Who, you know, the sonic screwdriver is this incredible tool that Doctor Who uses, and it basically does anything that he points it at, really. And it's a device used by the writers to solve their problems with logic, really. So it's not the perfect analogy, but I think it's a very good one, because, you know, the sonic screwdriver analogy says that machine learning just gives us, it's another way to do things, but it's a completely different way to think about it. So it's not just the application of another tool in the toolbox. The thing is that machine learning actually requires us to think about problems in completely different ways. It forces us to think about problems as joined up problems. So, you know, what I was speaking about before was like separating problems into small bits that we can understand and solve and then add back up into the evidence base. Machine learning takes all of that off of the table. It effectively joins up the problems again that we've separated in the past. So we have to think about it in a different way. And maybe, you know, the image that I've used here just tries to capture it, you know, rather than the different disciplines of medicine operating separately and all of the social determinants of health operating separately. What machine learning does is forces us to look at all of that at the same time. The other thing that machine learning does completely differently that we really need to change our thinking for is that it focuses on prediction. So we've never really been able to do prediction very well. And machine learning for the first time does with astonishing accuracy. Lets us predict who's vulnerable to developing which health problems, effectively. And, you know, some work that we've been doing at the moment, it shows that we can pick out which children are going to go on to develop depression much earlier than any diagnosis or screening would. I suppose, you know, that prediction thing becomes a real game changer in that, you know, it lets us devise interventions before they become costly and also before they become harmful to people's health. Okay. So the other thing is that machine learning also changes the way that we target interventions, how we treat people. It changes, as you've seen from some of those descriptions, you know, it changes the group of people that you need at the table to do health stuff. So you don't just need doctors, you might also need data scientists. We definitely will need data scientists, but you might also need people who can interpret between the different disciplines or the different focuses. I've put a slide up here about data because I think it's particularly important. I think machine learning completely changes what we look at for data. So, you know, I'm describing it here as the data door opens. Effectively, in the type of research that we do in health and medical, we're interested in data that's very close to the person. We're interested in data that's very close to the person. So we might look at, you know, doctor's notes or prescription histories or things like that. But what machine learning does is it opens the door to much wider data. So data that is, you know, on the surface of it, completely unconnected to the person that you're talking about. So it might be things like government data. It might be things like taxation records or the things that you've looked on Spotify for. It might be privately held data, like your visa transactions. Or it might, as a case I was reading last week, it might be your Twitter feed being able to predict depression. Okay, so coming to the end very quickly, making up a bit of time. The other thing, just before we move on, is that, you know, data. I've been trying to give a view from outside, but, you know, data is very important. Because no longer do we need to kind of look at specific medical data, we can look wider, but also the great power comes from being able to join up data sets that we've never really been able to join up before. So we might be able to put taxation data together with Spotify data and get additional power to it. Okay, so machine learning is obviously going to change the way we do things, But I think in preparation for that, we need to think about a few things. One is that kind of distance from the patient, distance from the person that you're concerned with. So evidence doesn't need to be close, which gives us so much more opportunity for early intervention and to be targeting interventions. Hopefully we'll cover this in the questions, but to target interventions to the people that need them. You know, in the type of work we do, in housing research, we have very broad brush interventions. Basically, we think, you know, who might need help with housing affordability, same as a whole heap of medical problems. We give a little bit of intervention to a whole lot of people. And actually, 98% of the people don't need it. But imagine if you could give a whole lot of intervention to the actual people that needed it. You could probably solve the problem for them and not waste the money. I've covered some of that, so I'll make up a bit of time. Okay. So I want to leave you with one remaining point. When you look at the examples that Johan and Anton have given you tonight, remember that machine learning is this thing in its infancy. So they're incredibly cool examples, but they're really only what a small group of kind of innovators have managed to do at the very beginning of a kind of a revolution. So no one in here, and especially not Anton or Johan, can predict what they might do in 5 or 10 years' time. Thank you.
Let's play Find the Microphone Works.
I'll keep this one.
Found it. Fantastic. Thank you, speakers. That was really, really interesting. So I've been working for the AIML for about 2 years, and I learn new things every time, and I have to remember that I'm an MC and not a a person that should be making up the questions. So please join me on the stage. I will try to make up some time as well because everyone's so passionate, which is a wonderful thing. I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate here, and I'm going to sort of try and keep it to some of the key themes. Oh, I can pass this along if you like.
I was just going to try this.
Oh, they work. Magic. So you highlighted some really key issues, each of you, in your speech, which we'll probably touch on a bit more now. And those are around ethics, those are around the collection and use of data, privacy, those kinds of issues, and targeting interventions as well. I think they're the critical factors. So I'm probably going to start with the hardest question and pitch it at my boss and pray that I don't get in trouble for it. So there's a lot of... Mine's not working. Was that you? No. So even I personally have done a lot of reading around issues of bias and ethics and things like that. So, you know, there's a lot of talk, particularly around medical, that a lot of the data sets are trained by one cohort, so, you know, white men, and that they're focusing on that male population. So how likely is it that the AI systems and the things that you're building are biased?
Bias is certainly a big problem. It's a problem in humans as much as it's a problem in machine learning systems. There is a practice in general in the medical literature where you test on men and, you know, a relatively homogeneous population of men because it takes out a lot of other variation. There is a problem in machine learning where we tend to have data sets that are built by researchers. It's the beginning of the field, and they get whatever data they can, and often that data has a bias in it. It might be that women are underrepresented, it might be that, you know, Chinese people or Africans or whatever are underrepresented. The advantage with machine learning is that you can measure it and you can fix it. So a lot of the news that you see about bias in machine learning is not so much in health, but it's the big one in sentencing in American courts. My interpretation of what happened there is that they blame the messenger. So if you've got a machine learning based system and you want to measure its bias, you can do it absolutely metrically. You can figure out exactly how much better it does on left-handed people than right-handed people or whatever it is. Whereas we've just put up with bias in humans. Frankly, we're all biased, but the whole medical system is biased. And there's a point about, one, don't blame the messenger, and yes, we can fix it.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Anton. Johan, I'll direct this next question at you. My health record, programs and systems like these things, people have concerns around privacy, how their data is being collected, what that data is then being used for. There's been some very famous cases in the US around this sort of thing, how the data was collected and then how it went on to train machine learning models. So imagine that I don't want people seeing my medical records, or I don't want to release my data. Is this a thing? Like, can I deny you the collection of my data? What sort of rights do I have over it after it's been collected? So can I still benefit from all of this? That was 4 questions in one. You have 2 minutes.
I just wanted to say that. I think, there's many aspects to your question. I think it's a matter of principle for anybody. So only that principles being eaten gradually, especially for the youth, by Facebook and others. And for some people, privacy is not an issue because they have just accepted it and embraced it. So it's a matter of discipline, and everybody should choose their own thing. On the other hand, it's really hard to trust the system if it's breached somehow. And there's no system that is perfect. So, but without this data, we cannot do stuff that Emma mentioned. So we cannot look at, without bias. If we could measure everybody, we wouldn't have bias of some kind for a certain question, to be very general about something. So, so if we are really careful about breach, and hopefully that doesn't happen, we can actually build trust that will achieve this and actually can help us solve the healthcare cost crisis in the coming decades, because it will increase. People are getting older. So it is a problem. So we need help and we need data for that. So that's an important point to make. So how to make this better? I think Estonia is a beautiful example of where people are owner of their own medical records, and we're doing a similar thing here. And the ideal system for me would be just that everybody knows exactly what study uses their data and could retract it any time. Mm-hmm. So I'm using UK Biobank data, which is the world's biggest biobank of kind of healthy people with normal diseases, and these people can actually retract their consent. And then last week I got an email: please retract these numbers from your database, not these people, these numbers from your database, because they have retracted their consent. So I think if you can be transparent and do that just in an online system and show that I'm a cardiologist and you have seen me speak and I want to do some research with your data and I'm going to tell you everything I do and you're going to use this bit. I would love to be able to approach you digitally, because that would save us time and actually answer questions way quicker. So there's an aspect of, there's a lot of aspects to this question, but it's a matter of principle, it's a matter of transparency, it's a matter of security, but it's also a little bit of trying to contribute to healthcare research of people who have good intentions.
Fantastic.
Can I add something to that?
You go. Look, I just think, sometimes as researchers, we're always because we're close to the data and we're close to the research, and we're concerned about privacy and confidentiality. But to a great extent, I think the challenge is really there for government. So government needs, now all of this stuff is happening. So government needs to put in place, the structure that not only kind of solves all those problems of privacy and confidentiality, etc., but it probably needs to do it in advance, so that research can kind of happen in a stream as fast as it needs to, not working to a problem with privacy and then trying to get over it and then working again. So I think there's a big role for government in trying to solve that, and the writing's on the wall that it needs to.
the bit that Johan showed of Gustavo's work predicting, finding hip fractures, the training data for that is a whole lot of hip fractures. Sorry, it was Luke's work. A whole lot of images with hip fractures and a whole lot of images of hips that don't have fractures. Nobody involved in the process knew what anybody's shoe size was, or what their postcode was, or what their inside leg measurement was. Right? That information is not represented in that data. So it's important to understand that most of what goes into these training systems is MRIs and CTs and this kind of thing, and personal data is just not represented in there. It doesn't go to the machine learning engineers. It's just, it gets stopped at the hospital and never leaves. The other thing is that Emma and I had a project that we launched trying to predict diabetes, particularly in Aboriginal populations, and the idea was that the current interventions aren't working, and that we could predict the onset of diabetes years in advance out of social data, and that might mean much better outcomes for all of the people involved. We had to give up on that project because we couldn't get the data to do it. And as a result, those people's health outcomes were, so we don't have a mechanism for predicting diabetes in those individuals before it happens as a result of that privacy concern, which I think is, we need to think about what are the ethics of not doing this research because somebody's worried that we're going to find out what their shoe size is. Everybody talks about what's the ethics of doing the research. Nobody counts the cost of not doing.
Yes, that's true. And Australia's a little bit behind the eight ball on the ethics side of things. They released the paper last year at CSIRO's Data 61, and there's still a lot of consultation going on. So that's a very valid point. Emma, I put the next question to you. So you talked about the need for the government to take a leading stance on this sort of thing. So what are the benefits for the government? Is it going to save them money? Is that part of it?
Well, I suppose, from my perspective, all of these things potentially save the government money. So if you're, for example, able to predict who's going to get a disease years before they go on to get it, you're very likely for them not to get it, and you're also likely, if they do get it, you've saved the cost of, you've greatly reduced the cost of treating it, most probably. So in one way, prediction can save money, but as I was sort of talking about before, I think by actually beginning to target who's vulnerable to certain things, rather than giving the broad brush stroke, which is what we often do, if we can actually predict who's going to be vulnerable, we can then target treatments just to them. And if you think about some of those very high cost treatments that we give to the whole population, being able to, that saves a lot of money. Yeah. I don't know. Can I give an example from housing? The way that we think about housing problems, and health problems are the same. So the way we think about housing problems is we might think, okay, there's a series of housing problems. You might have unaffordable housing, you might have poor quality housing, you might have insecure housing. So generally the way that we look at those problems is we deal with them separately. And by dealing with them separately, we tend to try and treat a heap of people that don't need treatment. But also, if you look at who's got housing problems, it's actually the same person that's got 3 different problems often, or 1 or 2 problems. So that means knowing how problems are kind of grouped together within a person also potentially saves money.
Fantastic. My next question is for Anton. So we have a lot of people in the room, probably a lot of proud South Australians here, who are going to have children and grandchildren in this state. Now, the future of work is rapidly evolving as we know it. Technology and AI and machine learning are going to leave no industry untouched. So therefore, as a state, we really need to think about how we're going to upskill these people and what opportunities are going to exist. So what skills are our children and our grandchildren going to need, and are we providing them in this state?
Sure, absolutely. it always amazes me that we don't have people lining up out the front door. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but trying to break their way in to the institute. We are sitting on top of a technology that is revolutionising most of the industries that you can think of, and a whole lot that you can't. And as with a few kind of preceding technologies, they make the people empowered with those technologies incredibly valuable participants in any team. So Johan's a cardiologist, but is here working with us because machine learning has a big impact in cardiology. So being an expert in machine learning or having skills in machine learning, I think is it's an incredibly powerful thing. What you need to be able to get there is, the easy answer is maths, right? Just do more maths, do some maths, do some more maths.
I'm sure the kids will love that.
Do some more maths after that. But the truth is that problem-solving skills, coding, and enough maths to be able to understand it is really incredibly powerful, and it hasn't changed, right? So when I went through into computer science, it was largely maths that make the difference. I'm sorry, but it's largely maths that makes the difference now.
That's very reassuring. I know my own children were very happy to hear that. So that's really good. So based on what you've just said, Anton, and Johan, what you spoke to in your presentation, it looks like AI and machine learning have got this covered. So our children won't need to study medicine because AI and machine learning will take care of that. Does that mean that our kids won't need to study medicine? Is this going to shape the way that medicine is trained and taught to our children?
No, I think we get to do the cool stuff. So the stupid stuff can be done by a computer, and we get to do the cool stuff, which is being creative and making a patient comfortable and happy. Where creative skills are, besides math, also crucial skills. So I think that's a major thing. I think that are seeing a patient in the sorry, I'm blanking. What did you say again? I was
sorry. Our kids won't need to study medicine anymore.
Yeah. So I still need to study and activate my brain. I had 3 presentations today. So pitching medical AI for Adelaide, so that's important. So I think seeing that there's actually a lot of excitement for AI in medicine, that radiology, that because a lot of people say radiology is going to be replaced. It's actually not happening. It's going to be changing. It's like the Industrial Revolution. It's going to be changing industry. It's going to change work, but people are still going to work. And I think it's actually going to be cool because there's going to be a lot of data to digest to actually diagnose something precisely for a particular patient. So it's going to be more challenging to be a good doctor, but also you're going to get some help with all these challenges. So I think it's all evens out. It's going to be as fun as being a doctor, as long as you don't forget to stay in touch with your patient and do what robots probably never be able to do. And I think the famous example that's happened in Kaiser Permanente in the US is that somebody got told that they were going to die through a remote, robot. That's something we have to definitely prevent, and that was the extreme that teaches us stuff. So we learn from our mistakes. So I think this is, it will be more exciting because we're going to detect people are going to stay diseased. They're going to have multiple different diseases. So it's actually going to be much harder to keep them at home and happy.
Great. This isn't exactly on the list, but it kind of expands on what you've just talked about, and I'd be interested to hear your opinion, Johan, yours, Anton, and of course yours, Emma. So you've talked about, this is going to augment doctors. This is not going to replace them. So we've got yourself that's a cardiologist and you're a machine learning specialist as well, and Anton is machine learning. So if you consider that, we come up with these solutions by training a data set, and you're looking at anomalies, say, for a chest cavity. I think that was Luke Oakton-Rayner's work. So you're looking at hundreds and thousands of images and you're labelling an anomaly in the chest cavity. So is that data correct if somebody without a machine learning background is doing that? Like, how does that work? Do you need a cardiologist who's also a machine learning expert to label that correctly? What's your opinion on that?
The short answer is yes, you need specialists to do it, knowing they will make mistakes. Even, the cats and dogs example is a beautiful example. But there are companies that are actually being paid to segment. So there's the biggest group in Vietnam of radiologists is actually doing this thing for machine learning purposes. Yeah. So yes, we will need that. And there's a lack of annotated data. So that's the start of every project. Is, do you have the data? And that's not always yes. And if the data is available, are they labeled properly so that we can actually learn from it? So,
and I think that's one of the challenges, isn't it, with machine learning, is making sure that people have enough data and that it's been labelled correctly to train it on.
Yep.
Great. Emma, coming back to your presentation, if the decision these systems make is based on hundreds of different factors, how can you tell if it's right, if it's picking up on the right information?
Yeah. Well, I suppose, that follows along nicely from what Johan was saying, and I would say that, the industry that will be created will be, slightly different in that there's lots more people at the table, and so you do need specialists and experts. So it means that you always need an expert on the team, and that I suppose really you're putting machine learning, you're doing a machine learning project, but you're still doing it within the way that we scientifically run scientific experiments. So you're still doing it with the same rigour. You're still questioning it. I had a conversation with a colleague at Melbourne Uni the other day, and she was pointing out the real importance of having, if you don't have someone who understands, for example, social data, you end up in all kinds of trouble. So yeah, I think one of the things that's happening is the teams are increasing, and you've got different experts that need to be part of those teams.
The change that that machine learning motivates is from causal models to predictive models. So a lot of the medicine and science at the moment is based on causal models. Human hypothesizes what the cause of this process is, and you fit a statistical model to the data, and you justify your causal hypothesis. The machine learning process is about prediction. You don't need to know what the cause is, but the prediction is likely to be more accurate. So the two methods are applicable in different circumstances, but if you want something to predict whether or not you're having a heart attack, then you probably want the best accuracy rather than the most explainable answer. And in some circumstances, there are circumstances where you do need to understand what's going on, but there are a whole lot of circumstances where you don't. We have this assumption at the moment that you need a causal model for everything, and in my opinion that's not true. Whether or not whether the answer is accurate is often more important than whether you understand it.
There's a lot of doctors that need to be convinced of that. To be sure, even myself, I'm sometimes questioning that, but I think I start believing in that as well. One extra point is the continuous audit, knowing the limitations of machine learning. Like any medication, you need to continuously check whether it's still doing what it's doing. So continuous audit of these new intervention algorithms, or it needs continuous audit because it can make mistakes on new populations, on new kind of people in a new era.
Fantastic. Well, being conscious of the time, I'd really like to thank our panel members for this insightful and interesting discussion. Like I said, I always get new things out of it, and I'm sure the audience has as well. So thank you, Professor Van den Hengel, thank you, Professor Baker, and thank you, Dr. Vergens. That was a really informative presentation, and thank you as well to our audience for attending tonight's session. This is the first of our Research Tuesdays for 2020, and I believe we have plenty more topics to come. So we hope you'll join us again. Thank you all for coming, and please enjoy your evening.